Well, hello. I have great pleasure welcoming Ramin Malik and Andrew Fong to Western Sydney Leadership Dialogues, Western Sydney Unfiltered. Hello, guys. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Good, thanks.
Excellent.
How are you?
Very well, thank you. Welcome aboard. Now, this is the first time that we've actually had two guests being interviewed at once on Western Sydney Unfiltered, but it's for very good reason. You're both young, accomplished people from Greater Western Sydney. You're both members of the Dialogues Generation West initiative. So it's really great to be able to speak to you about some of your views of the world that we live in, and perhaps the world that we would like to live in. Ramin, I'll start with you. I'm going to read a little bit of this because you've got such a strong CV, but you recently graduated from your chemical engineering degree, and I think you're also doing law. You're a Bankstown Poetry Slam performer and volunteer. You've performed at the Sydney Writers Festival and Biennale of Sydney. You've worked with refugees. I think you're currently working as a public policy intern at Amazon. Firstly, when do you have time to sleep?
We get that in.
Did I miss anything? Look, welcome and thanks for your time. Tell me a little bit about your involvement with the Generation West initiative. It's a program that's close to my heart. It's really important that we are able to share the views of a diverse membership of our community, not only from cultural background, gender diversity, but also age diversity. So I know you're an integral part of that group. Tell me a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, so a little bit of an intro to people who don't know about Gen West. Gen West is basically like a youth advisory group where we talk about the issues that matter to youth in Western Sydney. And those issues are really diverse, they're wide-spanning, and I think Generation West, what we do really well is, trying to really hone in on the views of lots of different individuals, whether it be about education, mental health, the future of Western Sydney and whatnot. And I think one of the things that's been exciting for me is to advocate for my community. I think there's something that's really, really special about talking about the place that you're from, the place that you've grown up with, and all of that pride that comes from it. And so Generation West has been really great in kind of bringing those voices together. But I think what's also great is that we're doing a lot of tangible work. So, we recently have our youth survey that had just come out, and we're processing results through that. And we're always outward facing, talking to leaders in the community, talking amongst ourselves about what we can do better to advocate for our community, and specifically young people in Western Sydney. So I think that's something that's really exciting for me. Just, there's something special about talking about your community and talking for them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is great having you on board. And Andrew, you're also a member of that group, but you're currently working with the University of Western Sydney's Academy. I know you've been involved with Deloitte's Shaping Future Cities initiative, but most impressive of all in my mind, you're a mentor to the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade's New Colombo Plan Alumni Ambassador Program, a mouthful. I'd like you to talk to me a little bit about that, but I also wanted to ask you a little bit about, you're a scholarship a recipient to participate in the Dialogues study tour of East London last year. And I'd just like you to tell the people a little bit about your experience there and the sorts of lessons that you learned and that we all learned and we can bring back to Western Sydney from East London.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Brett. Well, thanks for having Gen West on board. Firstly, I'd like to thank NAB, National Australia Bank, and the federal government for sponsoring both Lakshmi and I on this truly breathtaking study tour of East London. It was my first time outside of the Asia Pacific region. You mentioned the flats and being an alumni ambassador for the New Colombo Plan. So that initiative in itself, with the Department of Foreign Affairs, is sending young generation, our next generation of leaders, over to the Asia Pacific region, developing that international ties. So we have a strategic position and a foothold within the global sphere, so to speak. So it's been a pleasure doing that, and then also to top that off with my graduation. To go to London, that was amazing. To travel with so many different high caliber leaders from their respective fields, I learned so much. And to be honest, I was quite overwhelmed by the whole experience. However, a mantra of mine is to be a sponge. When in all doubt, to be a sponge. And even though I didn't know too much about the deep conversations about brownfields, greenfields, and the buildings, for instance, by just simply observing and being curious, reflecting, and by simply being there in person, in the flesh, I can relate back, reflect, and see how relevant it is to our everyday life.
So those sort of reflections and learnings, and you talk about absorbing like a sponge, which is great. Is there one particular thing that you would be able to take back from that experience and apply to the Western Sydney community?
Yeah, there's many. I mean, urban regeneration planning and strong cities in general. I never thought of it as a thing. Studying international business, I thought it was just big multinationals, trading and all that. But then going over there, and I realized that it's all interconnected, right? Urban planning and so forth. Strong cities are the bedrock of economic and social outcomes. So so that was massive for me. But one takeaway before I end here, Brett, is that leadership it's not for the faint-hearted. It's not for the faint-hearted at all. And I realized that during my time there, it takes a lot of effort, a lot of coordinated collaboration as well. So it's definitely put a different perspective for me on Andrew, just confidence.
We loved having you involved, and one of the points you just mentioned there was connection. So I wouldn't mind using that as a segue into both of you, asking about your connection to Western Sydney. Tell me a little bit about your Western Sydney, what you love about it, what you think makes it tick. And I also want to ask you a little bit about how you feel about outside perception, the reputation of Western Sydney. Is it really the scary place that the media and others might portray, or is that just a furphy? How do you identify with Western Sydney? Ramin, do you want to jump in first?
Yeah, so for me, like I was born in Western Sydney, grew up in Western Sydney, went to school here, and all of that. So it's been very much a part of my identity. And I think kind of one of the things that defines a Western Sydney identity is that diversity of experience. And I guess also just that, experience of always working hard and kind of always having to work hard to get wherever, you end up, and kind of being the outsider sometimes, to be honest, in a lot of situations. And I think growing up in Western Sydney has taught me how to be really resilient. It's exposed me to a lot of different cultures. Personally, it's helped me have pride in my own culture and my own identity, because I feel there are safe spaces to practice your culture and your identity in Western Sydney. And also one of the things that I think people find very surprising about Western Sydney is, the community that exists in empowering young people. So I found that in the form of the Bankstown Poetry Slam, and, having this community that was supporting the expression of young people from Western Sydney in a completely different art form was really, really great, because we were there, we were given a platform and an opportunity to talk in a language that we understood and we could talk about. And so I thought that was really, really exciting. And, all of those initiatives that I've been involved in within the arts, it's a testament to Western Sydney and that community that's all about kind of bringing back that sense of pride from where you are. I go to the University of Sydney, so it's a completely different experience, and I basically felt like a fish out of water. When I was there, I was like, oh my God, everybody's speaking big words and wearing fancy shirts. And so, yeah, when I went there, like, having that experience from Bankstown Poetry Slam, knowing how to form a conversation, knowing how to talk to people, and really having a sense of pride about my community and dispelling all those myths was something that made me feel really comfortable in those situations. So I think, like Western Sydney is all about resilience. It's like all about being in places where people might feel uncomfortable around you, but kind of like showing them what you're worth. So definitely. I think it just makes you stronger as a person.
Andrew, do you think it's a myth? Do you think that reputation that sometimes we see or hear about for Western Sydney is a myth? Do you have pride in your community, and do you feel safe to be able to express yourself in the way you want to express yourself?
Yeah, Brett, 100%. I'm very lucky to have been born and raised here in Western Sydney, the epicenter of harmonious diversity in this country. We, as a region, Brett, we are the envy of the world when it comes to numerous countries and numerous cultural identities living harmoniously amongst one another. I mean, I'm incredibly proud to be a part of that. And there's a great sense of care and belonging within our many communities here in Western Sydney. Whether you are Vietnamese, Samoan, Lebanese, Maltese, Italian, even Serbian heritage, you have friends that are from all kinds of cultural identities, and we're all proud of that, And we come, and there's many stuff I can talk about.
Well, Andrew, what I want to turn to, I mean, what the global pandemic has probably started to lend us to believe is that we need to sort of start looking inwardly. There's many countries around the world, including our own, our borders are virtually closed. We need to make sure that or there's a view that we need to make sure we protect, our own borders and our own people and our own communities from what's outside. My fear is that can have a bit of a racial slant, and it can become a cause for hatred and so on. Do you feel that? Do you think that's the case? Are we going through the great, from globalization down to a nationalism kind of focus? And is that going to impact these great communities of Western Sydney that have been brought alive and have been developed over decades because of the cultural diversity and the fact that we do come from everywhere around the world?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think COVID-19 has really raised that point where it's dividing a lot of communities. And I think a lot of the rhetoric, a lot of discourse around mainstream media has done a lot of the impact in that space, and I think it's very negative at the moment, and it shouldn't be.
Romain, do you have a similar view?
Yeah, I think I was talking to someone the other day, and we were talking about the fact that after every kind of economic downturn in Australian society, we've had a cut in immigration numbers. So it's coming, and I think the question that we'll have, at the tip of our tongues is how are we going to talk about this? Like, is it going to be, large bouts of racism that are just exacerbated in society? When you have conversation about jobs and the future of jobs, it's always about this idea of taking care of the people at home and all of those things. So I think, that kind of despair and fear that a lot of people have about the future might get projected onto racial minorities, cultural minorities, and, people who are migrants to this country. And it's kind of like, do we learn lessons from those past economic downturns and not fall into that trap again? Or kind of do we come out stronger? Do we fix that language? Do we fix that rhetoric? So, yeah, that's something that I'm really interested to see. And I'm hoping that, we can remain optimistic about people in, crisis. I think, as an Australian society, we responded reasonably well to COVID. So hopefully that kind of continues on the downturn. But yeah, it's really easy in situations like this to blame the outsider group for all the problems in your country.
Yeah. Look, the other thing that this pandemic has shown us, or has probably put a spotlight on, is that concept of loneliness and isolation. I mean, we've been forced to isolate in many ways, not only from the broader community, but even from our extended family and so on. And Andrew, I know that mental health and mental well-being is a passion of yours and you're interested in it. How have you responded to the environment that's been created as a result of COVID-19? And I mean, are there some positive things that have come out of it, along with, obviously the negative side of isolation? And are there things that you might be doing differently once we do come out the other side, if we do, when we do?
Yeah, no, it's mental health is massive, and I think it's even more so now during the pandemic. Working from home, and I think since I graduated only recently, and it's my first time in a full-time job. And then transitioning not into an office, but then back into my bedroom. That in itself was very, very different and very hard to, I think, get my head around. So mentally there, I was expecting to really go interact with my peers and my colleagues, but everything's Zoom, via Zoom. And I mean, we're on Zoom now. So, and
are you zoomed out, Andrew? Are you zoomed out? Yeah,
I feel a little bit. Yeah, I feel a little bit zoomed out indeed, and we're doing a lot of creative things at the moment with with our team. For instance, the academy, we're having a lot of different Zoom themes where we're having different backgrounds, we're having dress ups, we're having a lot of creative things. And next week, in fact, we're meeting up in Cabramatta for some Vietnamese cuisine. So it's very different. We all got to adapt, and it's universal. We're all in the same boat. So it's very important to make time for one another, and I think we've got to emphasize that fact. And I know a lot of cultures don't really take mental health as a real issue, but it very much is. And one thing I want to highlight as well, on the previous point, we talked about, Western Sydney and race and like division and so forth. And I mean, Brett, you name any identity out there in this whole world, any culture, on a spectrum between good and bad, all of them are good, right? I mean, if you can name me that one identity, I'll put my hands down and say, hey, mate, whatever, fine. But really, there shouldn't be this culture of us against them at all.
No.
We're all in this together, and I think Western Sydney has been, a great example of that, the epitome of, living together. So I think we should be very proud of that.
Has a unique opportunity to show the way forward. Out of crisis comes great opportunity. Ramin, I might leave the last question to you. I want to talk a little bit about the future of education and the future workforce, the next generation. I know you've got an interest in it, and as a recent graduate, but I'm sure you're still studying, and you'll probably study forever because you are one of the bright students of this community. But how do you think we need to adapt or change to be able to adapt to the changing nature of the economy, the future economy, as a result of COVID, but also just moving into, past the 21st century and so on?
Yeah, I think, it would be remiss not to mention the recent hike in university fees for certain degrees and the decrease for others. We've seen a 100% increase in the fees for arts degrees, across Australian universities, and, whatever that's in response to, getting a future workforce that is more about advanced manufacturing and all of that. I think that's really important. For example, as a chemical engineer, I'm finding that those jobs around advanced manufacturing, resources, water, all of those are, increasing in number, as we're kind of relying on domestic sources to really keep our society up. But I think also on the converse, an arts education or a humanities education is just so fundamentally important. I think, it's obvious that all of our politicians, they do have those humanities degrees, and they are where they are because of that critical thinking and that ability to communicate. And so I think, an automatic response being, let's lower the fees of engineering degrees and increase the fees for arts degrees is not the answer. We still need those critical thinkers. We need that empathy. And, I think as people from Western Sydney, we can really relate to that. We're often excluded from those conversations, and so an arts degree is a really, really great opportunity from someone from a low SES background to go to those larger universities to get that stepping stone. And, we don't want the politicians of our future being completely homogenous and completely privileged. So I think it's really, really important to not forget the worth of a humanities education, especially now, where empathy, where critical thinking is needed. And, as someone who's doing an engineering degree, I think we need more of that in our engineering sector. And I think one thing that will be really interesting is, I think, now's the opportunity to redefine the value of a university degree. I don't think in retrospect, it's for everyone. I don't think it should be a necessity for a job. As an early graduate, I'm finding myself pivoting to every field, sometimes except for my own field of engineering or law, because, that's how the workplace is right now. So I think the value of a university degree is really in question. I think we'll see a lot of alternate education, TAFE, upskill training within the workforce. Everybody's about teching up right now, and you don't necessarily need a 4-year university degree to learn that. And I think
you're absolutely right. I think you're absolutely right, Ramin. And I think the broader term education, whether it be university, TAFE, or other types of education, it really can be the silver bullet to economic, social, and environmental problems that we face. I think. And personally, I think education should be free, or a version of that should be free and accessible to everyone, because it can make the difference. I think that's a really good place to close. I think speaking with you two today, Andrew and Ramin, demonstrates that the leadership cohort coming through, especially those who are strong advocates for Western Sydney, strong advocates for minority groups perhaps, and strong advocates for youth, it leads me to believe that we are in very good hands. So I'd like to thank you for your time, not just today, but for everything that you do in your communities and in your families and your cohort. And best of luck to you. And please make sure you do get some sleep or get some rest in between all of those things that you do. So guys, thanks very much, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Brett.
Thanks for your time, Brett.